So currently, DSM-4, we have ADHD. We don't have ADHD minus the age. And they have the inattentive subtype. Okay, now, this is important to know clinically. Two differences between onset and when it's first diagnosed. Okay, what is the onset of ADHD? And the onset is birth, or sometimes even before. It's not rare that these kids in utero are more active for some reason. Okay, I guess it gets boring after 9 months, Anyway, but typically ADHD is first diagnosed at the age of 4, and why age of 4? There's nothing magical about that, but that coincides with when they first start going to preschool. And I think the really big issue is this, and that is parents love their kids. They put up with all kinds of stuff. But when you take them to preschool, for many kids, this is the first time that they sort of start to be in a situation where they are expected by others to control their behavior, follow the rules and all that kind of stuff. And it's not unusual that, the first day of preschool, that night, parents get a call from the teacher saying, hey, there's something wrong with your kid. Everybody else can sit in a circle and your kid can't. So that's when oftentimes you can diagnose this. Now, there are cases that are on the milder end of the continuum, where they may not ever get diagnosed, or they might not get diagnosed till high school or college. It just depends on the severity of the symptoms. The so-called inattentive subtype, the average age where they are identified as having problems is around 9. The history matters a lot here, and this tends to be something that's pretty easy for parents to recall. These kids, compared to normal infants, okay, they cry a lot, but they're very hard to soothe. And that's something parents really, do remember, because I know when we had kids, we had other friends were having babies at the same time, and everybody was jealous when somebody said, hey, my kid slept through the night for the first time, how about yours, that kind of thing. But people have others in their life that kind of compare developmental milestones and that kind of stuff. And these kids, it's harder to calm them down, and also it's much harder for them to develop regular sleep patterns, okay, and they may be just more restless in general. Now, depends on who you read and what studies you look at, but I think there's general consensus with ADHD. About 80% of kids that have the real thing, okay, are going to show these very early manifestations. So they probably are not going to go get treatment, very early, but they are showing the disorder very, very early in life. Now, the reason this is incredibly important is because we need to differentiate ADHD from a number of other disorders that superficially may look similar. Okay, in childhood, impaired self-control, hyperactivity, impulsivity, and the problems with motivation. In adolescence, what you really see here, a lot of disorganization. If you look at their lockers at school, or their notebooks, or how they organize things in their room, just really, really chaotic. And of course, this will last for many people into adulthood. Inflexibility in problem solving. They kind of get stuck on something and they can't. Part of what the frontal lobes are really good at doing is assessing, is this working? And there's a symptom called perseveration, where a person keeps doing the same thing even though it doesn't work. And so the ability to self-monitor and evaluate outcomes, say, wait a minute, hang on, this isn't working. Let me back off here. I need to rethink this. And it's harder to do, even though the kids may have an IQ of 130, okay? So there's kind of inflexibility, all right, and what looks like procrastination. Now, this is a partial list. I should add to this list severe attachment disorders also. But there are lots of different psychiatric disorders that can cause the outward appearance of restlessness and trouble focusing and paying attention. John Waka from Hopkins, who I think I mentioned once before, he says almost every kid's got a major emotional problem. Is going to wiggle, squiggle, and not be able to pay attention. So in doing the diagnostic workup for here, it's not just diagnosing the ADHD, but it's ruling this stuff out. And I'm here to tell you that can't be done very adequately in a 20-minute visit to the pediatrician, where most of the treatment is taking place. Let me mention a couple things in particular, though, just to underscore this. Situational stress. Okay, little Tommy, can't pay attention, is wiggling around, and maybe he's got ADHD, maybe he doesn't, but let's say the truth is that his mom's got cancer, you know, or they're about to lose their house, or dad's got laid off from work, or you know, they're being molested or something. You know, outwardly it might look like ADHD, but you give this kid's world is falling apart. You give them stimulants, what's going to happen? They're just going to get jittery. You know, it's not going to help at all. But the big problem, though, is that the real issues are not going to be addressed. Okay, and then the other thing, pre-psychotic. Now, in the United States, each year there are 2.5 million kids that are treated with stimulants. Okay, so keep that as a large number, but it's not, most kids with ADHD are not being treated, believe it or not, but 2.5 million kids, okay? Now, each year in the United States, on average, 40,000 kids are started on stimulants and within 6 to 8 weeks are in a psych hospital because they are floridly psychotic. 40,000 kids. Now that represents 0.2% of kids given stimulants, which doesn't sound like very much, but you start to say, but wait a minute, 40,000 kids. These kids do not have ADHD, but the teacher thinks they do, or their parents think they do because they can't sit still and they're restless. It's because they're starting to disorganize, they're starting to fragment. These are pre-psychotic. And it's been known since the 60s or even earlier, you give stimulants, you know, prescription stimulants or methamphetamine, cocaine, to somebody's got schizophrenia, and it'll just push them into psychosis because they've got dopamine problems to begin with, you know, and you load them up with more dopamine. And one of my professors at Baylor used to say these kids got one foot in psychosis and the other on a banana peel, and you give them these drugs and they get psychotic. Okay, so it really bothers me a lot that in managed care, there's lots of pressure put on pediatricians to not refer. Oh, you can do this. These medicines are safe. You know, you can't. They have very few side effects. You know, and every pediatrician treats them. They need a comprehensive evaluation to rule out this stuff.